Well, hello and welcome to Hockey Talk. It's our second episode today. I'm Jaret, Matt Durnan, Jaret Schneider. This is our second episode, and Matt, we'd like to welcome all our viewers in Flin Flon and the Paw, as well as right here in Thompson. So, Matt, a couple of games into the NHL season now, 4 days to be specific. What types of things did you see from some of the teams and some of the boys offensively?
Well, I just want to start off by qualifying that I went 0 for 4 on my picks last week, so anything that I say should probably be taken with a grain of salt. But glad that hockey's back.
Yeah,
great
absolutely.
to watch hockey, have hockey on every day. But good. The game seemed to flow pretty well. A little bit sloppy here and there. You can kind of see the guys are trying to work out the kinks a little bit. You can tell that no preseason has kind of had a little bit of an effect on them, especially goalies looking a little bit sloppy. Goals are up. There's definitely been a lot of goal scoring. But the pace of play and the game itself doesn't seem to have suffered from the extended lockout, so I'm glad that it's back. Yeah, what about you?
Yeah, I would agree with you. You mentioned the goalies. Some of the goalies looked a little bit shaky. Some of the top-end goalies, Lundqvist, Rinne, and Quick, they looked a little bit bad in their first couple of days, but then there's some of the secondary goalies who maybe did play over in leagues like Switzerland and the Germany League and things like that, who did come out ready to play, and no preseason did have effect on some of the players as well. Some of the AHL teams with guys like Eberle and Hall and Nugent Hopkins over in Edmonton, they came out to play their first game. They played very well against Vancouver, won in the shootout. They got smoked last night, but they did look ready to play in their first game, and so that's kind of how things would go for me. For surprise teams, looking at this point, early on in the season, only been 2-3 games in, what types of teams have kind of surprised you to this point right off the bat?
Well, on the good side of things, Columbus was a surprise for me. I mean, 2 games to start the season off, kicking off against Nashville and Detroit, 2 tough teams, and they took 3 of a possible 4 points, beat Nashville in OT, lost to Detroit in a shootout. That was a winnable game. They were up 2-0 in that game, I believe, and just let it slip away. Ottawa, a 2-0 start. I picked them to be the worst of the 7 Canadian teams. I had them finishing 7th, and they came out 2-0. They beat Winnipeg on opening night. MTS Center, never an easy place to play. They beat Winnipeg pretty soundly, and then shut out Florida, I believe, 3-0 the other night. And New Jersey, I was surprised with. They've had a pretty good start, starting out 2-0. Shut out last night for Brodeur over Philadelphia, another game that we picked. We both had Philly in that game, and especially with losing Parise and the slow start that New Jersey had last year, I expected them to kind of stumble out of the gate, but they've been a little bit of a surprise. So, how about for you?
For surprise teams, maybe right off the bat, number 1 surprise team would probably be the Buffalo Sabres. They're only 2-0, but they looked good in their first 2 games. Ryan Miller had a great game against the Leafs the other night. Absolutely shut the door. Was very dominant.
Yeah.
Stole that one. Give up a late goal, but other than that, it was practically a shutout for most of the game. Another surprise team, well, maybe not a surprise, but a team that's looked very well is the Chicago Blackhawks. 3-0 to this point. They kind of had a bad year last year. Maybe not a terrible year, but didn't finish where they wanted to, and this year obviously looking to rebound from that, come back a little bit with another stellar offensive start so far, 3-0. Another surprise team would be the San Jose Sharks. Had a good first game last night against Edmonton Oilers, dominated them, scoring 5 goals in the opening period.
6, wasn't it?
6 in the opening period.
They scored 6 and kind of put it in cruise,
6-1 and ended up winning 6-3. Antoniemi looked good in the net. Defensively, they looked good. Boyle got a goal from the point for surprise teams. Other teams maybe that didn't have such great starts, for me, that maybe are a little bit of a surprise on the bottom end of things, on the bad end, would be Vancouver. Obviously 0-1-1 with only 1 point in 2 games. Lost to the Oilers on opening night in a shootout, or second night, sorry.
Yeah, they got blown up by Anaheim in the first game.
Yeah,
7-3.
Yeah. So Vancouver looking a little bit bad, obviously with their goaltender controversy right now with Schneider and Luongo. So looking bad so far would be Vancouver for me. I had them
for the number 1 Canadian team, so I'm not too sure about that right now.
Yeah, and second, maybe, obviously a surprise would be Philly, 0-3. I mean, Philly you'd think would contend for the division this year. 0-3 start, lost a couple of bad games. A little bit shocking. Brizgalov hasn't played very well at all in the net.
He didn't play very well last year either, though.
No.
So
I mean, that's not really a shock, I guess. But but Brizgalov, he played bad. Another bad team off the start would be the Washington Capitals, I think, for me anyway. 0-2. I thought they'd have a good year. I mean, with picking up Mike Ribeiro, they lost Semin, but Holtby is a year older in the net. Ovechkin, you think, would come out tearing it up, played over in Russia.
Basically stole the series from last year against Boston, right? And he's kind of looked a little bit shaky this year.
So the Caps 0-2, good offense. Like I said with Ribeiro, that would be some of the surprise teams on the bottom end for me. What about you for bottom end teams?
I would definitely agree with you with Philly. never expected them to come out to 0-3 start. It's not the easiest schedule playing against Pittsburgh. New Jersey was a bit of a shocker, and then but 0-3 is definitely shocking. The Rangers for me.
The Rangers, yeah.
Starting at 0-2, very surprising. Lundqvist has not looked good to start the season. He's been a little bit shaky. I guess the no training camp, the no exhibition games. He's kind of getting used to the NHL speed, trying to get himself worked into it. That's a little bit surprising. And another top-end goalie, John Quick in LA, who's another disappointment for me, starting out 0-2.
Yeah.
And Quick has given up,
5 goals in the first game
and
then
3 to Colorado last night. So 8 goals, 4 goals a game for John Quick is just very uncharacteristic. So, and the Cup champs, I mean, a lot of people always talk about the Stanley Cup hangover, but they've had the extended off-season that they're not coming back after only 2 months rest. They've had that full 5 months rest pretty much just like everybody else. So there's really no excuse for them to have this slow start. So to them, a little bit shocking.
All right, so I guess we'll take a quick break. You're watching Hockey Talk on Shaw TV. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to Hockey Talk. I'm Jaret Schneider along with Matt Durnan. Matt, we were just talking about some of the surprises so far this year, obviously with Chicago being one, well, maybe not one, but 0-3, LA 0-2, and some of their goaltenders that haven't...
Chicago 3-0.
Chicago's 3-0. Yes, is that what I said?
You said 0-3.
0-3. Chicago's 0-3. 3-0.
It's all right.
Did it again.
Sometimes I suck at life too.
So anyway...
I'm 0-4.
0-4 on picks. I'm 2-2. So... We were talking.
500 is not bad.
We were talking about the surprises and some of their goaltenders. Obviously, Quick not having a great start, or Lundqvist not having a good start. What about from you? What goaltenders maybe have kind of stood out at this point, having good years, and some that maybe aren't having such great starts?
Ryan Miller, as you had mentioned, stole them the game against the Leafs. I'm a Leafs fan, so that one kind of hurt.
Hurt a little bit.
That one hit home. Brodeur, a little bit surprised about, got his first shutout already 2 games into the season. I think he was a lot slower last year to get to his first shutout. I don't have the exact number because I said we don't really prepare that well for this show. We're just going to go off the cuff. But Craig Anderson looked really good. He kept Ottawa in that game, season opener against Winnipeg on Saturday. They were getting outplayed very badly early in the second and even early in the first, and Anderson held them in there. He's looked really sharp, really kept them in some games. Niemi has looked good for the Sharks. Last night didn't really have that much of a workload after going up 6-1. After the first, there's not a lot to do. You're kind of bored. But he's looked good. He's looked solid for them. Luongo's looked all right in his limited work. He can't really be too faulted for that game against Edmonton. The Eberle goal was a nice goal, coming out his off wing and then the backhand up top, and then losing a shootout. Definitely looked better than Schneider has early on. I'm trying to think of who else. Brizgalov has looked terrible, if you want to talk about disappointing. But he's been absolutely
That's
brutal.
Really a surprise,
he's out on his own little world half the time and has no clue what he's doing. As far as on the bad side, yeah, the top-end guys, what's really been surprised for me, that Lundqvist, Quick, have just looked miserable so far this year and really haven't. That
doesn't mean they won't turn it around. I mean, obviously they'll turn it around.
But as we had mentioned last episode, right, you have a short season. You don't have that 10, 12 games to kind of settle in. If you go in a slump and you take that long to get settled in, it's almost too late. You're kind of going to play yourself out of a playoff position if you take that long to get settled in. So on your end, who would you say has looked good?
So some of the goaltenders so far for me, actually, one would be maybe Carey Price. Played very well off his start. I think his goals against average is under 2 right now through 2 games.
Yeah, but the Leafs beat him.
The Leafs did beat him, yeah. Only give up 2 goals in that game, and then he had a pretty stellar second game. So Price, for me, looked pretty good off the start so far this point of the year. Another one would be Kari Lehtinen in Dallas.
Yeah,
played very well. He's beating me in the hockey draft right now. In my hockey draft, I'm getting beat up by the guy who I'm taking on by Kari Lehtinen. Yeah, well, I've got Quick. So
yeah, I'm getting beat up by Ryan Miller.
Ryan Miller, yeah. So Kari Lehtinen, I mean, he's got 2 wins off the start. He's playing very well. Goals against average down. His save percentage is actually over .950 to this point, if you can believe that. Only 2 games, but save percentage over .950 is really hurting me to this point. Yeah. Tuukka Rask in Boston's played, all right.
Leafs traded
him away
for Andrew Raycroft.
So
that one worked out well.
So Rask played all right. Obviously, he didn't have the greatest game against Winnipeg the other night, but. He
only gave up 1 though, right?
Did he only give up 1? Yeah.
Yeah, it was 1-1 and then they went to shootout, right?
A couple of days ago, yeah. So I mean, Rask's played pretty stellar to this point. Maybe guys on the bad end, obviously you mentioned Quick, Lundqvist, and Rene haven't played all right. Maybe in Detroit there. Detroit's not started so well with Jimmy Howard in net. Detroit lost a couple of games, but they've won one, so they are 1-2 at this point. Detroit kind of bouncing around. Rene in Nashville not having the greatest start.
You could also kind of relate that to. You look at it, you can kind of say, how important are those number one those stud D-men? You know, Detroit's lost Lidstrom, Nashville's lost Suter, so you kind of have to look at the value of those guys right now, that you don't have those studs on your back end anymore. The goalie's getting a little bit more work, and he's seen a few more opportunities come at him than he normally would. So, you know, you kind of got to look at it that way and say, is it completely the goalie's fault? Maybe the goalie wasn't that good and his defensemen were making him look good, or maybe now it's just showing that he isn't that great, or he just wasn't used to having this workload, and he's got to settle into seeing, you know, a few more 2-on-1s a game, a few more odd man rushes, a few more clear-cut shots from up in the slot. Maybe he's just not used to seeing that when he's had, you know, those Norris candidate quality defenders in front of him.
Yeah, and maybe you are right. Like, obviously, you talked about Detroit with Lidstrom gone now. Obviously, I think that's hurting Detroit big time. I mean, they're only 1-2.
Oh,
you think
they were brutal, 6-0 the first game. I couldn't believe that. St. Louis just walked all over him.
Well, St. Louis is a good team, but I mean, Detroit, they haven't came out very well. Obviously, defensively, they're really sucking right now. I mean, hopefully they can turn it around.
Nice word. They're really sucking right now. Detroit's really sucking right now.
And then in Nashville, you mentioned Suter too. I mean, he's obviously hurting them not being there. I mean, they still have Weber back there defensively, but helping out.
But he was his D partner, right? You never know how that's going to affect Suter's workload when he's used to working with one guy and the way that he plays and where he positions himself. He's working with a new partner. I'm not even sure who he's playing with back there right now.
And arguably Weber is an offensive defenseman as well, too, right? I mean, obviously he does throw big hits and stuff, but he is an offensive defensive type of a guy. So what type of goalies have you seen so far this year that, you know, maybe aren't doing so well? Maybe in, like, obviously Vancouver with the Luongo trade, stuck with the possible trade with Schneider and Luongo. Do you see him possibly being shipped out in the next little while?
You know, it's going to be really tough for Vancouver. I've been thinking about this for the last couple of days. It's like, what do? You have to weigh your options out. Is Schneider that guy that he was last year, that when he took over for Luongo, is it kind of an issue of Schneider had nothing to lose at that point because he was trying to win the job, so he's going to go out there with not a lot of pressure on his shoulders? And I think it was kind of an issue of he came out opening night, and it was like, here's Luongo looking over your shoulder. It's your job to lose now, not your job to win. So it's a completely different situation when you're saying, you know, you're thinking in the back of your mind, I don't know. I'm not inside Corey Schneider's head. I don't know what he's thinking. But that could creep in your mind thinking, you know, 1-2 weak goals, I could easily lose my job. That goalie that's sitting behind me is paid more money than me. I'm sure that Vancouver doesn't have too much of a problem throwing him in. As you saw, they threw him in. Did he get out of the second period? I don't think Schneider got out of the second period. No. I think he was gone after the first. But the second game against Edmonton, Vigneault had already said, I'm going to start Luongo one of these two games because they played on back-to-back nights, so you knew Luongo was coming in. But to this point, Luongo has more playing time. Do they roll with him now? Do they kind of say, we can stick with Roberto, or do we shop him? Do they kind of play him to showcase him around and say he's still got it, we can trade him? Or do they throw Schneider right back in there and let Luongo kind of rot on the bench and then wait for the offers to come in?
Yeah, well, I know for tonight, obviously, Vancouver's taking on Calgary. It is, I believe it's our pick game for tonight. Schneider is in the net. I've already gotten inside knowledge that Schneider is back in the net tonight, apparently. So they're giving him the number one shot again. They're giving him another chance. Obviously, didn't have the stellar performance as he started. Like you mentioned, obviously, trying to showcase maybe Luongo a little bit. Wouldn't hurt to give him a couple of games and try to trade him. And now Vigneault has came out and said, you know, they're close to a deal with the team we don't expect it to be. So what maybe does that mean? I mean, obviously, maybe is he maybe not near a deal with any team, and he's trying to put pressure on Toronto to try and come back and make a deal now, trying to ship Luongo out that bad? Maybe does he want to get?
Well, who are the front runners? I would love to see him come to Toronto. He wins in the regular season. He's yet to prove too much in the playoffs, per se. I mean, he was one game away from winning a Stanley Cup against Boston in 2010. But Toronto at this point, they've got two young, kind of unproven netminders. Scrivens hasn't looked bad. He's been strong. He's given up 3 goals in 2 games.
No, you're right.
You can't argue with that, really. We'll see what he does tonight. He's got to play against Pittsburgh, a high-powered offensive team. Reimer is actually starting tonight, sorry. But they are starting Reimer. So I guess Toronto kind of gauges their situation. Who I think also stepped into the ring for the Luongo sweepstakes was Philly. And we've mentioned that Brizgalva's been brutal. So
maybe is that more of a possibility?
Could they perhaps be kind of trying to leverage themselves in there? And who do they move to get Luongo? I don't really know what the price is. I've heard a lot of different offers, but I don't really know what the price is to get a guy like Luongo at this point.
Yeah, for Toronto, I mean, they've had good goaltending to this point. I would think Scrivens has played pretty well. Scrivens has had a good start. I mean, obviously Reimer, we'll get to see him tonight against Pittsburgh. But Scrivens started the year very well. You mentioned moving over to Philly if Luongo possibly does get traded there. I know they are one of the front runners as well, but what types of things maybe do they get traded? You know, the Shen brothers.
They just picked up Luke,
obviously
right?
They just picked up Luke.
Seems silly to trade them off.
But what other types of things maybe do they have? And then Florida's another possibility for Luongo too. He's went there. He's already played there before, and maybe does he want to go back? Obviously, being in Florida, there's nothing wrong with Florida. I mean, it's beautiful there. But
is it?
Do they have anything?
Volkun and Clemenson splitting right now?
Yeah, I think so. So does Florida have anything possibly to trade for Luongo? Is it worth it for Florida? Do you think it might be worth it for Florida to pick up a mid-age goaltender that's kind of on the downslope now?
They were a playoff team last year, so maybe they think that can get them over the top. Who knows? Volkun is a pretty decent goalie, so I really have no idea where he's going to go, to be honest. It's been a bit of a mystery. We have heard a few teams, but there's never been any mention of anything really being that close.
Yeah, so also, before we wrap this one up again, the Shen suspension today.
You mentioned Brayden Shen, yeah.
1-game suspension. Brayden Shen was hit on Anton Volchenkov because he left his feet. I mean, he did leave his feet. Obviously, he did a little bit. When he hit him, kind of went up a little bit more. So I think that, he jumped a little bit and then obviously hit Volchenkov, went up a little bit more. But what do you think from that? Do you think it's warranted a 1-game suspension from him?
It's kind of a gray area for me. I'm not 100% beefed up on the rule book. My feeling on it is if you watch the replay, you see on one of the angles that you see the referee is looking directly at Shen when he steps into Volchenkov.
Yeah.
And the ref stands there, doesn't raise his arm. There was no penalty on the play. My feeling is that Shanahan is kind of undermining his refs and saying, you're not getting the job done on the ice. I'm going to step in here and do the job. I feel like if there's no call on the ice and the ref is looking directly at the play, no suspension. That's the ref's discretion. He's the closest to the play at the time that it happens. If there's no penalty, there's no suspension. If it's something that happens behind a play, the refs aren't looking, a guy slashes a guy, go ahead, suspend him. Because the refs can't see everything. Let's be honest. But if the ref is looking right at a play, sees a guy lay a hit on a guy, doesn't call a penalty, no suspension.
Yeah, I would agree with you to that point. Obviously, I don't think there should have been a suspension on that play. Obviously, Shen's coming out of the box, or out of the bench, so he's got energy, he's got speed. Obviously, he's trying to. They're down in the game. They're down 3-0 to New Jersey at that point.
Maybe trying to inject some life.
He's trying to get some life in his team. I don't think he deserved a penalty. Volchenkov is a little bit of a bigger guy. I mean, there was a little bit of shoulder to head, but it wasn't a blatant, a head contact hit.
Not an attempt to injure, really, right?
Anything like that. So I think we'll take another quick break. You're watching Hockey Talk on Shaw TV. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to Hockey Talk. I'm Jaret Schneider along with Matt Durnan. We were talking about some latest hockey news, obviously with Brayden Shen's 1-game suspension, and now there's new talk about Scott Gomez. Obviously, he was bought out by the Canadiens. He started to practice a little bit with, guess who? The San Jose Sharks now, who have played well. Obviously looking to get over the top. I mean, they've blown it in the playoffs the past couple of years. Maybe Gomez helps them. Look at it. A 1-year, $700,000 contract for Gomez. We'll see if they do sign it here in the near future. But what do you think about Gomez possibly playing for the Sharks for maybe the rest of the season?
I think it's good for Gomez. I don't know if it's good for the Sharks, but for Gomez, he's played his last, 4 years between the Rangers and the Montreal Canadiens.
Yeah, he's bounced around.
New York, any team in New York, there's a big spotlight on you. Montreal, huge hockey market, a lot of spotlight, especially for the contract that he was getting paid for, was it $6 million?
Yeah, something like that.
A year with Montreal to score 1 goal in like
hit.
900 games or something like that.
Yeah, it was over a year, I think. He went about 82 games without a goal.
Yeah, he went a long time without scoring. So the pressure in San Jose is not going to be nearly as paramount. He's got 2 good lines in front of him. He'll likely be put on the 3rd line. He'll be out there to do, a little bit of grinding, maybe a little bit of penalty killing. He can kind of just get back to playing hockey and not having to focus so much on being the center of attention, being that high-paid guy who's coming in with all these expectations from the fans, from the city. San Jose, not a huge hockey market. They do well year to year, but I don't think the spotlight is going to be on Scott Gomez in San Jose the way that it was in Montreal or in New York.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Obviously, with only a $700,000 contract, he'll be put on the third line or even fourth line, like you mentioned, to kill some penalties and things like that. Gomez, I think he's a good fit in San Jose, actually, going down to California. There's no pressure on him. I mean, the cameras, the media in San Jose is obviously less than half the time it is up here, especially Montreal. So I think that's a good fit. As far as picks go from last week, what types of things? Obviously, you mentioned you're 0-4.
Well, I was terrible last week. I went 0-4. We picked the Jets versus Senators game. Both of us picked the Jets.
At home, opening night.
At home, at MTS. They were almost untouchable there last year.
Big 4-1 loss.
Yeah, not impressed with myself or the Jets. Rangers, Pittsburgh. You picked Pittsburgh. You got that one right. I've got you down there, so you're up on me 1-0. I picked the Rangers. Bupkis. Calgary, Anaheim. You had Anaheim in that one. You went up 2-0.
Yeah, Anaheim.
Me still 0-3. I picked Calgary in that game. And then New Jersey, Philly, kind of the surprise game again. Philly came up a little bit empty, got shut out by the Devils and Martin Brodeur, and that would make me 0-4. And you 2-2. So
like you mentioned, after a half week, 0-4, 2-2. We'll do this for the rest of the year. We'll see how things shake down.
I'm off to a Philadelphia Flyers type of start here. I'm starting slow, but I'll probably find my rhythm midway through the season. So we'll start out with tonight's game. Calgary, Vancouver.
The late game tonight. Two Canadian teams. Obviously, Calgary 0-2. Vancouver is 0-1, I believe. So, I mean, battle of the winless teams.
Someone's going to get their first win tonight.
I believe it's in Calgary.
It's in Vancouver.
It's in Vancouver tonight. So, battle of two Canadian teams on Wednesday night hockey. So, I mean, there's no pressure of Saturday night hockey. I think Vancouver's going to come out to play. Schneider's going to be in the net. Calgary, I don't know. I'm not a firm believer in Calgary yet this year. So, for this game, I'd have to take the Canucks at home.
Okay. I'm going to agree with you because you got picks right. So I'm still a loser. I'm going to take Vancouver. I think, like you said, I think Schneider has a little bit of a bounce back game today.
Yeah.
At home, the crowd was chanting for Luongo. We'll see what happens tonight. This could be a make or break game for Schneider because if he blows it again, he could really be losing his job. So we don't really know. But I'm going to say Vancouver. I'm going to say Schneider comes out. I'm going to say that Vancouver gets it done. Thursday night hockey. Big game in the Eastern Conference. New York Rangers, Philadelphia Flyers. That's in Philly.
In Philly.
Another two teams without a win looking for first wins. What do you think?
Well, that's a tough one for me. I mean, the Phillies obviously 0-3. It's in New York. It's in Philly. It's in Philly. So it's the Rangers and the Flyers. The Rangers, I think they come out to play in Philly, but Philly at home, I got to go with Philly. 0-3 start. They don't play tonight, so they do play their fourth game tomorrow. I got to go with Philly. I got to go with Philly at home to bounce back. I can't see them starting 0-4. It's just, obviously, an 0-4 hole is a huge hole to climb out of in a short season. So I got to see Philly bouncing back. Obviously, not the goaltending situation they want. Shan will be missing that game, but I think the Flyers, Drew and Hartnell are going to step up offensively, and they're going to put up a good number of goals, and I think they're going to get past Lundqvist.
Okay, I'm going to go against you on that one. I think that Lundqvist, this will be his game to get it together. I think he's had his 2 games. He's kind of going to work out the kinks. And what I'm going to break it down to is if I'm looking at Lundqvist versus Brizgalov, I'm taking Lundqvist every day. So I think that Philly, a little bit scoring challenged against arguably the best goaltender of all time, Martin Brodeur. They might be a little bit snake-bitten. They might be a little bit lacking confidence after an 0-2 start and getting shut out their last game. I think their offense might struggle. They might be trying to force it a little bit. And if you're not getting top-quality chances against Lundqvist, even if he has been bad in the first 2 games, I think they're going to have a hard time scoring. So, and New York can get those soft ones because Brizgalov does give up those soft ones, and those could be backbreakers for a team like Philly, who is fragile after not having a win. And I think that New York's going to come out on top of that one.
All right, so that's Thursday night hockey. That's the Flyers and the Rangers. What do we have for Friday night?
Friday, we're going to stick with the Winnipeg Jets, home team. You got them on your cap. I don't know if you're supporting Paul, our cameraman, again. He's raising his fist like he's thinking a win. Taking on the Pittsburgh Penguins, who are undefeated at the point of this broadcast. They still have to play the Leafs tonight. We're not sure how that game's going to pan out. But on Friday night, as of this point, Pittsburgh's still undefeated, going into the MTS Center to play the Jets on Friday night hockey.
So a big game, obviously, for the Jets. Obviously, if they can take out the Flyers or the Penguins, it would be a big game for them. But I got to go with Pittsburgh. I can't see Crosby and Malkin coming into Winnipeg. Obviously, the home crowd's going to be rocking with Crosby and Malkin there. Fleury and net, I got to go with the Penguins as a gut feeling here in this game on Friday.
Okay, I'm gonna stay with you on that one with Pittsburgh. I think they are the better team. They've got a little too much firepower. I think it's going to be a little bit closer than
I think you're right.
People would imagine. Winnipeg looked really good against Boston, held them to 1 goal, took them to a shootout. Unfortunately, didn't come out on top. I could see this game kind of going the same way. I think the Jets will be a little bit better this time on home ice. And the Canadian teams, all in all, didn't fare too well in home openers. The Canadians got upset by the Leafs in their home opener. The Leafs went back home, lost to Buffalo in their home opener. The Jets lost, their home opener.
Edmonton had a brutal game last night.
Edmonton was brutal in their home opener. Vancouver was brutal in their home opener, getting blown out by Anaheim.
And Calgary's undefeated, so I mean, I think every Canadian team.
I think that they've kind of got those initial nerves out of the way. After the long layoff, you're amped up, you want to play big in front of the home crowd. So I think that the Jets got that initial little bit of, energy, that nervous energy out of their system. I think they'll play a lot better, but I still think Pittsburgh just edges them. Maybe in overtime, maybe in a shootout. I'm going to still go with Pittsburgh, though.
All right, so that's Friday. That's the Penguins and the Jets. For Saturday night hockey, obviously most games in the week on Saturday. What do we got for Saturday night?
We're going a little bit off the board. It is Hockey Night in Canada, but we're going with 2 non-Canadian teams. This will be the West Coast game. This is Phoenix, the home team, hosting
Western Conference,
the Stanley Cup champion LA Kings. This is a rematch of last year's Western Conference final.
For me, Western Conference final rematch, the Coyotes and the Kings. That's a tough matchup for me. Obviously, the Kings haven't started very well, but I think the Kings are going to pick up a win before then, so they won't be going into that game undefeated. So I'm going to go
winless.
Winless, yeah. So I'm going to go with the Coyotes in that game on Saturday.
Okay.
The Kings haven't obviously came out very well being a winless team. I think they are going to get a win, like I said. Quickle is going to play a good game. That's going to be a good matchup, though. Obviously, the Coyotes have came to play so far to this point in the year. They've got a bit of a rocky start at first, but they're starting to shake things down now, a couple of games in. So for that game on Saturday, I'm going to take the surprise team, maybe the undercard team with the Coyotes.
Okay. I am going to go against you on that one, so that means I'll probably get it wrong. I'm going to go with the Kings. Maybe, as we mentioned, the Stanley Cup hangover, it shouldn't really exist. Who knows what happens between now and Saturday? I'm not sure. They might have 1, maybe 2 games. I haven't looked too much at LA's schedule.
Yeah, they might.
But I feel like once they get their first win under the belt, they looked strong last night against Colorado. Colorado came back to win that game.
In the third period, a couple of 3 goals in the third period.
They had a big comeback. But I think that LA is going to kind of shake out those early season jitters. Quick will get it together again. It's the same thing with Lundqvist. I mean, he can't be bad for that long. So I think that Quick is going to figure it out, and that LA is going to come into Phoenix and beat them 3-1.
3-1?
Yeah.
That's a good score. So that's Saturday night's game. We've got a couple left because we'll go to Tuesday. So what's Sunday's game?
Sunday game, I'm not sure if this is a matinee or usually the Sunday ones are kind of matinees, but this is a Central Division matchup. The Detroit Red Wings are visiting the Chicago Blackhawks.
Ooh, that's a good matchup. For me, obviously, Chicago's came out to their blazing start at 3-0. I have Chicago finish, obviously winning that division. I have Chicago winning the Central Division, I believe. St. Louis will give a push. But for me, in that game, on Sunday, I have to go with Chicago. That's probably an afternoon game. That's probably an NBC game, I would think. So for me, I got to go with Chicago. Crawford's going to come out to play in net. Taves, Kane, they're going to come out and work hard.
How about Hossa? He's been firing.
Hossa, Seabrook on the back end. So, I mean, Chicago, I got to take Chicago in that one. Detroit, they have came out to their rocky start so far, 1-2. So they are able to turn around. Datsuk and Zetterberg, obviously phenomenal players.
1-2 or 1-1?
I think they're 1-2. I think they've played 3.
Anyway. As I said, we don't come with a lot of notes. We just kind of go and just do it on the fly.
So for Sunday, mark me down for the
Blackhawks.
Blackhawks.
Don't be emailing us and saying, like, oh, you screwed up that game. Everyone makes mistakes.
Ah, you can do that.
I won't reply to them.
Paul does.
Okay, so, sorry, we're getting off track here.
Blackhawks, Sunday.
You got the Blackhawks Sunday.
Yeah.
I'm not even going to break it down. I'm just going to go with Detroit for the sake of spite. Because I think that Detroit is going to beat Chicago because Chicago is going to lose to Detroit.
Is that one in Chicago or is that one in Detroit?
That one's in Chicago.
Okay.
Chicago has looked good. They beat St. Louis, who came up to a firing start.
Yeah.
They absolutely...
St. Louis looked very well in their first couple of games.
Yeah, good young team. Moving on, Monday, we got Colorado, who just arguably upset the LA Kings.
Stanley Cup champs,
visiting the Edmonton Oilers, who look brutal. But again, we're going to go way off in the future. We're looking at Monday, so who knows what happens between now and then. But based on what you know right now, who would you think would win that game?
So that game's in Edmonton. Obviously, Edmonton with their terrible home opener last night to San Jose dropped that one 6-3. Colorado looked very well last night against LA. If I had to pick the game right now, I would always pick the Avalanche on the way the things have been going so far in this season. In Edmonton, though, I'm going to have to go with the Oilers at home. That one's tough. It is harder to pick games in advance, but Colorado, they looked very well last night. They went down 1-0, kept it all the way until the third period, and obviously the young team, the bounce-back team, Landeskog had a goal, P.A. Parento had a goal. So the Avalanche looked very well last night. They were able to solve quick on a couple of actually end-board goals, so a couple of fluky goals, but the Avalanche looked very well last night. But for that game on Monday, I got to go with the Oilers at home.
All right, I'm going to agree with you on that one. I think that Edmonton, apart from that first period that they came out absolutely flat last night against San Jose, they were arguably the better team. They outshot San Jose in the second and third period, I believe. Once they got Dubnyk out of there, who you can't fault him for too many of those goals, but the Oilers came out flat. Let's get to the realistic point here that they, as I said, were probably nervous. Bunch of young guys, a lot of rookies like Schultz, Yakupov, and still even second-year guys like Nugent Hopkins. They got Hall, Eberle, young guys, super amped up to play their home opener. With all the hype that's around them this year after they have been so bad, I think they just kind of fell flat on their face. They were a little too hyped up. They made a lot of dumb mental errors. I think they're going to settle it down, and then they will beat Colorado on Monday.
All right, so that's Monday's game. Before we go, we're running out of time now. We'll hit Tuesday's game here, last game of the week.
Tuesday's game, going to California. We're going to have Anaheim visiting the San Jose Sharks. Anaheim, good start. San Jose, good start. This is almost going back to, the year that Anaheim won the Stanley Cup, where these guys were the top teams in the West. It's almost looking like that at the start of this year, where Anaheim's just been filling the net. They put up 7 against Vancouver opening night, popped 5 on Calgary in their second game. So Anaheim's looking like they're having no problem scoring. San Jose absolutely filled the net in the first period last night against Edmonton. So this could go either way.
Who do you take in that game?
It's almost like a home ice doesn't really exist. They're both California teams. It's not a lot of travel. It's almost like you're looking at Toronto versus Ottawa or Edmonton versus Calgary. Home ice kind of gets thrown out the window at that point. So from what I saw from San Jose last night, they look really good. So I'm going to have to go with San Jose.
I was going to take San Jose, so I will agree with you on that one. The Sharks looked very well last night in Edmonton on the road. Obviously, Anaheim's put up 12 goals in their 2 games on the road, both in Calgary and Vancouver. So for that one, for me, I got to take the Sharks as well. I got to tie that one up with you and pick the Sharks. So other than that, looking at the whole week's games, what do you hope to see this week?
A little less mistakes. Just a little bit more clean, mistake-free hockey. It almost felt like, I think you had mentioned to me, we were watching a game, and you said it's almost surreal that hockey's back now. It just kind of came out of nowhere. And it's got to feel kind of that way to the players, where there was all this time sitting and anticipating. And then all of a sudden for these guys that weren't playing, even for the guys who were playing in Europe or even playing in the AHL, it's not the same as NHL hockey. So to get thrust right back in there, all of a sudden, no training camp, no exhibition games, it's a lot to take in. So you're bound to make mistakes. It's bound to be a little bit sloppy in that first week. I expect the second week's going to be a little bit more of a clean game, a little less mistakes, a little less dumb penalties, a little less mental errors, and you'll probably see a more NHL quality game for the next week.
All right, so that'll pretty much do it for this week. We're running out of time. Jaret Schneider along with Matt Durnan. Wrapping things up for this week, obviously look forward to some games. We'd like to thank everyone watching for Flin Flon in the Paw, as well as here in Thompson for the second episode of Hockey Talk.
How do they reach us?
How do they reach us? They can reach us through Facebook at Shaw TV Thompson, on Twitter at Shaw TV Thompson as well. And I believe the email is shawcable11 at shaw.ca. If you have any questions or would like to be a guest or something, we can talk some hockey with you. If you'd like to come on and do a little bit of a Q&A kind of thing with you and see what you guys like to know. So you can hit us up on those 3 things. And for Hockey Talk, for episode 2, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.